The Vegas Eternal just might end up being the worst team and organization in Overwatch League history. It's not a bold claim to have predicted Vegas to be the worst team in the league this year, as that's what most people are thinking. That was a pretty common consensus last place prediction. It's how they've gotten here through their performances in other circumstances that makes it stand out and worth talking about. Under normal circumstances, we wouldn't waste our breath with Vegas. We all knew they weren't going to be good. They just don't have the talent. But it's going way beyond that currently, and that's why it is alarming, and that is why we have to have a discussion. From the preseason all the way up until right now, here in the breaking point of Week 3, we have seen so much nonsense that has negatively impacted the Vegas Eternal and knocked down their ranking even further than what I'd consider to be the lowest possible number. Now, in all fairness, some circumstances are a bit out of their control, like with the money, for example, and moving from Paris to Vegas. A lot of this stuff is some of the higher-up decisions. They have nothing to do with it, and I don't exactly blame all of the players either. I think a lot of it is management and higher-up screwing everything up. But regardless, let's talk about this. So I think it all kind of started last year, really, right? They decided to move away from their core that somehow won a lot more games than people expected. They ended up winning just a single game in 2022, and they decided that this was going to be the core they would roll with anyway. Vegas stuck to the book too much instead of trying to make some improvements along with the stuff that was already working for them. Along with that, you have to wonder about higher-ups and ownership, how management's doing. Do they have the right manager? Do they have the right coach? All of that could be an issue as well, from top to bottom. We'll get into some of that stuff a bit later in the video, as there are some key details that make it very obvious that not everyone is a fan of what Vegas are doing internally, and that may have screwed some people over in the past due to incompetence and potentially ruining their careers for at least a little bit. Regardless though, we have to look at where this started to go downhill, and I'd like to pinpoint what happened during the preseason. Apparently they weren't doing all that well in scrims, maybe to be expected, but where things got noticeably worse is when they lost to Samito's team in an Overwatch World Cup trial matchup. Now that is some crazy stuff. No offense to Samito, I mean, he's an awesome guy, great content creator. He was a former aspiring pro as well, but he's never been Overwatch League level, and the team he assembled is nowhere near Overwatch League level, and yet the Vegas Eternal found a way to lose to a team that was mostly entering this event for fun. There is absolutely no excuse to be losing to a team like this. You are in the Overwatch League. You competed in the Overwatch League last year, so how do you lose this game? And it would seem that was a surefire sign that things were only going to get worse as we head into the Pro-Am, and once again, they look embarrassingly bad. They win just a single map that they probably should not have won in the first place. They lost to a contenders team, and they lost to a Valiant team that had been scrimming together and had known each other for like 2 weeks. Again, there's no excuse for that. To get 2-0'd by a team like that literally has no support whatsoever from their organization and are out there fending for themselves, like how do you manage that? How do you manage to struggle that badly? How can you not beat a team that is literally brand stinking new with nothing there to help them? And I guess this was all a precursor to what was going to happen in the regular season, which might even be even more embarrassing than what we've seen in the preseason, as the 4 games they have played in 3 weeks have been some of the most uninspiring, lackluster matches we have ever seen, with some of the most predictable outcomes. And that's saying something because we have watched the 2018 Dragons and the 2021 Valiant in the past, and even they might have had higher expectations at the beginning of a season, at least for now. Because man, those first 4 games have been separated into 2 different arcs. The first one is getting absolutely clowned on by Lifeweaver comps of all things. Lifeweaver is quite easily one of the worst heroes in the entire game. A lot of people will say he is the worst hero right now, at least on the support role. And we had teams willingly running him against them and actually finding mild success. Take the Justice in the couple of fights they won, as well as the Florida Mayhem, who played him every single map of that entire series. That is borderline disrespectful, and it shows just how little people care and respect the Vegas Eternal. Just the fact that teams were finding mild success, were winning fights, winning rounds, winning maps, is a surefire sign that the Vegas Eternal are in a completely different league than the rest of the Overwatch League for the worst reason possible. And this is only the beginning, because what we barely bared witness to here in week 3 is some of the greatest organization incompetence we have ever seen in this league's history. Admittedly, in hindsight, it was hilarious and it provided some great entertainment value, but there's just no excuse to be putting your general manager out there as your 6th player in an emergency situation. There should be no world Ravala's out there on support and then you swap over Luke Mino from support to DPS. It just shouldn't happen. That's one of the most ridiculous things in the entire league's history, and it's going to take the cake as one of the biggest clown moments ever. Usually with this kind of stuff, it's supposed to be a joke. It's a meme. We talk about how Bob from accounting or the general manager is going to be the 6th player, but they're never going to play. They're just there to fill out that 6th role, so then they can follow the league minimum. They can have their 6-player roster. Everything's fine. But it's never supposed to go beyond that. It's always supposed to be a joke. But Vegas made it a reality to add on to their absolute crazy clown status. I suppose in the long run it doesn't make much of a difference. They're likely going to lose that game to London anyway, no matter what happened. But there's just no excuse for something like this to ever go down. That's what really bothers me in this whole situation. How is it that Malthel is having internet issues? Isn't he supposed to be with the team? Where is he? This is why a 6-player rule exists, for crying out loud, for these exact situations. And it's not exactly like Vegas would be losing out if they got another player. They could use as much help as possible right now considering their current state. Not even the worst teams in league history have had something like this happen to them before. Even they have always been able to go out there and compete with a normal roster, regardless of how bad they were. The Vegas Eternal, though, they're setting a precedent right now. They are trying their best to be the worst team, the worst org, the worst everything that we've ever seen. They're doing a damn good job because they looked like absolute clowns by having such a thing happen to them, and no one feels bad for them. That's the thing. Because of their incompetence and the way they decided to roll with things, nobody out there feels bad. And what's crazy is this isn't even where Vegas's terrible week ends. It doesn't seem like it can get any worse, but it really did if you paid attention to the NYXL game. If you didn't watch it and you see the score, you might say, hey, Vegas look a bit better. They took a map. But when you learn the context behind it, that's when you start to worry. Arguably, NYXL's best player at DPS, Fitz, moved over to support for multiple maps in this series. It took Fitz playing support, playing Brigitte and Ana for the Vegas Eternal to take a map this season. It took one of the worst teams in the league having their star player off-role to have any sort of meaningful results, and even then, I wouldn't really consider this to be meaningful. They were a lot more competitive, but NYXL didn't exactly look that great. This is the classic Changoon crackpot, if you will, where he makes questionable decisions and then it blows up in his face. Fitz is obviously not going to be the greatest on Brig or Ana. Maybe not the worst we've ever seen, but you can't expect him to be good. And Kellen was also making all sorts of mistakes. This team looked lackluster a lot of the time with Fitz not on his natural role, a bit lost at times, and yet they somehow still ended up winning this game when they had every reason to lose it. They played so bad in this game, but Vegas somehow managed to play worse. I mean, really. They were practically gift-wrapping the Vegas Eternal a victory in this scenario, or at least the chance to make this a map 5. But no, they only took one of the maps in which Fitz played support somehow, along with the fact that New York were making all of those mistakes, and they still could not capitalize. They still were not confident or competent enough to make this a series. Again, it's one of those scenarios where it felt like Dove was the only one doing anything on this team. That has been a consistent theme throughout much of this season for them, at least here in the early parts of it. It's Dove versus the entire world, and this guy's not going to do it all on his own, especially when he himself is not a superstar. You can't expect anything. Such a golden opportunity to potentially avoid a winless season right down the drain, just like that, because no one else wanted to consistently show up. It was always flashes here and there, but they just couldn't get it done. They were lacking that confidence, even when New York were giving them lots of reasons to gain it throughout the entire series. It's an embarrassing loss, and it adds on to a very embarrassing week and season overall. So yeah, in the span of 3 weeks, where 4 games were played during that instance, Vegas have already accumulated 3 negative headlines that have clouded their season even further. That just has to be a record, right? This is like 2018 Fuel status. It's that bad. You're the garbage team who can't even beat a Lifeweaver comp. You can't beat the NYXL, who are literally trying to lose at this point. and you're playing your general manager at support because of these random issues that never should have happened. The roster itself just doesn't have many high points whatsoever. When I watch this team play, for the most part, it feels like Dove is the only guy that can do anything, and even he can only do so much by himself. Sometimes I'll see something from Lugumino or Rack Attack, but it's on rare occasion for the most part, like Lugumino on DPS the other day, and the occasional support frag that I'll have with the Ana or the Baptiste. But outside of that, it's an atrocity. When you watch Malthel play, he's not of much assistance whatsoever. He feels to a lot of people like the worst flex DPS in the league in terms of starters. And Vulcan has also been a pretty big issue. Individually, it feels like not all of him is there at times, specifically in that Winston meta. His dives are not very good going in by himself. There's a lack of coordination. He looks a bit better when he can play something like the Ramatra or the Sigma, but it still has a lot of work to do, and it's obvious he is not in sync with the rest of this team. It's obvious Vegas should have gotten another tank, and it's sad that they didn't have the money to do so. I'm assuming that's the reason. Maybe it's something else, but I'm assuming they just don't have the funds to get another player to make this roster more competitive. They need that flexibility and that second option at tank, but they're not going to get it anytime soon. But I suppose being out of sync doesn't just extend to Vulcan. It's more of an everyone type of deal. Nobody feels like they're playing together. I don't know if it's because of a lack of confidence or something else, but there's just more and more regression as the weeks go on. We're not seeing any sort of refinement with their gameplay. It's stagnating. It's very sad that this team is regressing and losing so much confidence when we know what they've done in the past during the Contenders era, and the fact that they've already had all of this Overwatch League experience to begin with. When you're already at rock bottom, there shouldn't be any more regression, and the fact that there is extremely concerning, and it makes me wonder what the heck is going on over there. Nobody wants to play them. Not even the worst teams in the league think that they're worth their time. Nobody's interested in practicing against them. It's sleeper to play against them in an actual game setting. There's no point. They're basically not even a team. It feels more like we have 18 teams than 19. They look so lifeless when they play. It's like there's no desire to win whatsoever. Like they're not trying hard enough. Well, they are trying hard, but in the wrong ways. They're not accepting their fate and trying in ways where they're just trying to have fun, like their counterparts in the LA Valiant, and that's where they're ultimately failing. It's really a big statement when the Valiant, according to Jake, are noticeably better in scrims, like multiple tiers above, and people are actually willing to play against them because they try, and they put in an effort, and they make the games interesting. The Valiant, a team that has existed for a few months, is more interesting than you've ever been. It makes you wonder if there's any sort of other internal or perhaps external issues that are leading to more problems for them, that are leading to greater struggles. It wouldn't be the first time the Eternal have been involved with drama. We've seen it happen in the past. All you have to do is look back at 2020, which gets me into my points earlier where we criticize management as well as ownership. Management as well as the higher-ups, they've been criticized by the general community multiple times in the past. They've been hated on in the past for some of their decisions. They've been questioned greatly. Aval in particular, the general manager. She's been under a lot of heat from this community for quite some time now, I'd say. I won't get into all of the details. It's not necessary, but a lot of people question some of the choices she's made. Whether it's just on her or maybe some other people as well is irrelevant, as it would seem that multiple players in the past and even the present have been treated unfairly. They've been criticized unfairly. They've been talked down upon, and it's made it so it's been harder for them to get a new opportunity in the league. If you guys remember, last year Naga got released from the Eternal very early in the season, and a bunch of the blame was pinned on him for not playing well and for being a big reason why they sucked, when that wasn't true at all. They were terrible with and without him. It made no difference, but he for some reason was the scapegoat. And that also transferred over to some of their guys from 2020. After getting his revenge and defeating the Eternal in a 3-0 during week 1, Ben Best had the following to say: "I was waiting for this karma for so long. Mad respect to their players, but this is what you deserve when you lie about players, trash them, ruin careers, and act like an angel on social media. Trying to take the lead alone and fire the people for their influence is so selfish." This is pretty eye-opening, as Ben Best is usually a pretty nice guy. He'll fight for what he believes in, but usually he'll keep things like this to himself. So whatever happened to him on the 2020 Eternal was really bad, and he might have got screwed over out of a potential job maybe the following season after the Eternal stuff happened. It took him like 3 years to make it back into the league, so you have to wonder if his reputation took a hit because of what happened internally and what things were being said about him. And the fact that he's likely not the only person to have suffered from the race types of things shows that Vegas need to start over from top to bottom, get a clean slate, and make their organization a lot more professional. Because you should never be playing the blame game like this. You should never ever be spreading information and potentially ruining careers for your own selfish agenda. At this point, I'm convinced that going to the Eternal is a place where your career goes to end if you're not a Korean superstar. It's like this graveyard. And then the moment that people leave, they immediately get better. All you have to do is look at Croy and how he's doing on the LA Valiant. He's looked a lot better on there. Not that it's saying much because on Vegas there was nothing but bottom to see, but he's looking better, looking more confident on the Valiant. And Wub, who isn't in the league, is looking a lot better in Contenders now. He's back on his natural role. He's not being suffocated by Vegas. It seems like it's just a nerf when you play for this team. It's so terrible. This goes to show that it's not just a player, roster, or coaching type of thing. This is an everything type of deal, from top to bottom, and it's incredibly unprofessional. It makes me so angry that Vegas continue to make more and more mistakes like this, and that every sense of their team is completely incompetent and messed up from the ground up. I'm so disgusted about every aspect of this team, and as bad as the players have been, I really don't know how much of it is on them. They're losing confidence and not playing well, and they definitely do deserve some of the blame for the issues, but I'm starting to wonder how much of it actually falls on them, and how much of it actually has to do with incompetence from every other aspect of the team that's putting them in a situation where there's no way they could succeed. I'm so done with this team, man. I have nothing else to say. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to give a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And if you enjoyed this type of rant video, maybe we'll do more in the future. Maybe we can do a more productive what is wrong with your Overwatch League team video in the future. But for now, that's all I've got. I wanted to vent about Vegas because what we've seen so far is historically bad, and they are on track to be the worst team of all time.